Hello and welcome to Happy You Asked. I am Erin Clare, your host. And with me today, I have Dr. Aaron B. Daniels, who is an associate teaching professor of psychology and a senior mindfulness fellow at Northeastern University, my institution. And he's a former psychotherapist and a certified spiritual director who has published 6 academic books. Aaron, thank you so much for being here.
It is absolutely my pleasure. It's a favorite topic for sure.
Yes, everybody gets the same first question, and it's especially for academics, it's a tough one. What is your definition of happiness?
There we go. Um, so I think about Seligman, and that his fundamental quest was, we talk so much about what's wrong in psychology, my field of clinical, what's right. And he said, we've got tons of information about how people live better, richer, longer, happier lives. And so he set up these three containers of approaches to it. And the first is stuff. I get
Mm.
stuff and I have a spike in my happiness and then it deteriorates.
Like a new phone, right? Something like that.
For instance, although
Yeah.
we'll get to that. And what do we mean about this spike? The spike is well-being, health metrics, longevity of life, quality of relationships. Happiness has measurable effects, at least as Seligman is constructing it. The second box, which has a longer burn, less empty calories, is experiences, right?
Mhm.
And so we hear people say, give somebody an experience, right? So go out to dinner with them and have a conversation, go on a trip with them, just go for a walk with them. Experiences have a longer burn.
Mhm.
What I hone in on and I smugly take as justification for my strange corner of psychology is that the third type of happiness isn't happiness at all. It's meaningfulness,
Mhm.
a sense of meaningfulness and engaging in that, which is an ongoing process, has the longest burn. It'll carry you for a lifetime if you continue to grow and develop and unfold with it. So when
Mhm.
I think of what's my definition of happiness, I say it's an abiding and ongoing commitment towards meaning making.
Oh, I love that. And a very academic answer, grounded in all all sorts of knowledge. It wasn't like going for a walk. I mean,
Having a
it could be.
dog, that's
Yes,
actually the answer. Never mind. Having a golden
exactly. I have
retriever
one
is
right
happiness.
here.
Oh,
I present to you Westy. Westy is
oh,
happiness. Yes, this is
hello,
my
Westy.
sidekick. That it's true, but if you want something with some meat to it, your answer, your answer. Now, we're colleagues at Northeastern, and I've been eager to have this conversation because your work sits at such a fascinating place. You're a
Hmm.
psychologist, you're a mindfulness fellow, a spiritual director, and you also write books about aliens. So,
Hmm.
how do you explain what you do at a dinner party then? Where do
It depends on who I'm talking to.
you...
Um, yeah, well, it comes back to I've known that not finding what is meaningful, but examining the engagement with the process has
Hmm.
been that through thread for me. And in undergrad, back when the earth was still cooling, I was at Baldwin Wallace in Ohio, which is a great classic liberal, yeah, exact case
Yes.
Western for you.
Yes, I am an Ohio girl as well. I was going to talk to you about that.
Uh,
Baldwin Wallace. I love Baldwin Wallace.
it looks like a college, right?
Hmm. Feels
Grassy.
like one. Old building stone, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And a great conservatory. So at Baldwin Wallace, it was a very good psych department that had different colleagues of different ages and different foci. But the key was we kept reading research articles. Yay.
Mhm.
And what I discovered is they didn't stand up nearly as well to the skeptical scrutiny which we were being taught to apply to them. There were holes in the methodology. The results weren't nearly as strong. They were cherry picking results. And so I had a lot to write about in my essays, but I was left really wanting that will the quantitative methods get us to the stuff that explains why I choose to get up in the morning?
Mm.
We can take that back to Camus and his question, which is far more dire, right? Camus says the only meaningful question is suicide. What keeps us going? What makes us, the fact we're here, we chose to live today. We don't act that way. We act like we're on autopilot, but that's another story. So anyway, back to reading these articles. I was dissatisfied with what the quantitative methods were showing in terms of the individual experience. And mercifully, I was exposed to existentialism, and then that got me into phenomenology. Phenomenology, this kind of parent of a lot of the qualitative methods. When people talk about doing grounded theory and ethnography, phenomenology has informed it quite a bit. We go back to probably the great-grandfathers Brentano, and then Husserl and Heidegger, and Merleau-Ponty is probably the big phenomenologist. And out of that, you don't get postmodern thought, Derrida, without Merleau-Ponty. They're really responding to phenomenology in a way that they don't always acknowledge. So we have a lot of folks who I'm at a conference and they're saying, well, we really need to get to the experience. I say, have we given up on phenomenology? So how do we deal with the nature of our experience? How do we give voice to the nature of our experience? And that's the through line. If I'm giving spiritual direction, I want the person to speak from their experience, to validate their experience, to figure out the metaphors, the images, the uh, overwhelming feelings, repulsion, whatever, and give voice to that in that experience. Why is it not therapy? I'm not given a diagnosis. We're not worrying about pathology. We're not applying, treatment. We're having a conversation, and the key is what is the phenomenology of them? Describe your lived experience. That's that engaging with meaning. So spiritual direction. My work on Dante, I was able to bring together some just lovely scholars, incredible folks. And these were all,
Dante, such happy work.
well, by the end it is. And right, and in Vita Nuova, which is kind of the prequel to the Commedia,
Mhm.
he sets out his whole agenda is to give voice to the nature of experience, to find that poetry which can say what it is really like to live.
Mhm.
And he finishes Vita Nuova, the new life, by saying, I don't have the words to express the vision that I now have, and I
Mhm.
will strive to that. Segue into the Commedia. And the Commedia is him saying, this is the nature of my experience. And if you
Mhm.
dig deeply into his wording, if you look at his tensions, if you look at the overall arc of it, you realize he is saying, I'm going to keep expressing, keep finding new words, keep digging into the poesis, that fundamental poetic nature of expression. And it is intentional. It is teleological. It has this end built into it that as I keep giving voice to it, it keeps drawing me on. And then finally, he once again comes to this sublime inability to express, but it is because he has come to face the absolute divine.
Mhm.
And he there are words like transhuman, and he says, I finally intuited that I saw something of ourselves in that. And in that moment, realizing that it is that active engagement, it is that phenomenology that leads to this encounter with the divine. And finally, he just says, the love that moves the stars, right? The love that moves the sun and the other stars. Um, that quest of coming up to those edges of we can't say this. There's not words for it. Ineffability. That's what the alien stuff is about as well. That dark encounter with the inscrutable, that a certain portion of alien films do very well. Um, 2001: A Space Odyssey is
Mhm.
burned into my psyche. I was a 3-year-old, and my family took me to a revival of it. In Star Wars came out, and Stanley Kubrick says, "Oh, wait, sci-fi is big again," and so he re-releases the big 70 millimeter copy of it, and it goes around. And so little 3-year-old me is in that theater staring at the black monolith. Um, and although in the storyline in the background in the books, in the 2001 Legacy, they explain what all that's about. It's just a portal. In the film, what Kubrick does with it is say, nah, we can't make sense of this. We are incapable of making sense of it. But the encounter with it transforms us. It
Yes, yes.
forces us into that place of meaning making because we pick up stuff that, Heidegger says is ready to hand. And we know what it is. It's a hammer, it's a book. But then we do that with people. It's a person, it's my student, it's my colleague, it's my wife, right? Suddenly people are just these boxes we put them into. And what startles us into these moments of, I don't know what this is when it doesn't fit, when it mismatches. So
Like
often,
in Contact, right? Like that movie where they has to be like a human form, otherwise we won't understand it. That's what you're talking about, like that?
precisely.
Yeah.
Contact, I loved and Jeremy Renner, Forrest Whitaker, and Amy Adams, the alien. Ooh, I need to have my
Yeah,
film list.
and yeah, you're talking some my brain, it's like menopausal right now, so I'm like, oh, that's gone. I can't help.
Arrival.
Yes,
Arrival.
okay, yes, yes.
The alien language is inscrutable to humans. Amy, who is the linguist in it, is transformed to something not no longer quite human in order to
Mhm.
understand the language, which becomes the evolution of humans because of the encounter. You've got darker films like the original Alien, where what's
Yes.
so terrifying about it is you don't see the alien for the vast majority of the film. Um, and sure, a good Freudian, also Julia Kristeva, tell us why that is. It's filled in with the unconscious. Jung would even say so. But I don't know. That's where I then kind of get into lovely conversations with my psychoanalytic colleagues. Um, China Mieville, who's one of my favorite fiction authors and theorists, has this term abcanny, and that plays a big role in the Alien volumes. The abcanny is what not only doesn't mean, but is actually deteriorates our ability to hold meaning. And Mieville critiques the psychoanalytic interpretation by saying it's the unknown known. I can't know it, but ultimately I have the secret decoder, Freudian decoder ring or Lacanian decoder, where maybe, and the Christavian, it's a devouring mother, it's Oedipal
Mhm.
conflicts, whatever. Mieville says, great, and that's probably true a lot of the time. There's an awful lot of horror films that are pretty Freudian.
Yeah.
The famous Men, Women, and Chainsaws interpretation of what horror, slasher horror in particular, is about. But with the Abcanny, this encounter with what not only can't make sense, but what undoes meaning in the encounter, I
Mhm.
think that's really interesting. And I think
Yeah,
there's
it
huge
is. Yeah.
implications there. That was a really long response to what
It
ties
was
together.
fascinating. I was on the journey. I was with you. I was there. But what called me though is like, all right, so you grew up in Ohio and like Quaker influence, Amish visits, right? So I'm assuming it's the Youngstown part.
In a home, I grew up in Canton,
Oh, yeah.
actually in between Canton and Massillon.
Yep,
What
I know
about
right where
you?
that is. Painesville,
Oh,
Ohio.
we played you guys.
Yep, I was gonna say I know. I've been to Massillon. We had to do a marching band there, competitions. Yeah, I've been there many a time. So how does that, do you think, from that
Yeah.
background, get you into Aliens and Dante?
Yeah, the Ohio I grew up in is not the Ohio of today.
No, it's a different
Um,
place. Mm.
that I should know the author's name, but the idea of American nations, where a guy tracked the county by county voting, and he had came up with 11 very distinct versions of America. Ohio, from born in the 70s into the 80s and the 90s, had three distinct stripes across it. Up near the lake was Yankeedom. It was
Yep,
more
that's where
related.
I was.
Yep.
Connecticut
Um,
Reserve.
then there's a stripe that's the Midwest. And that's solidly the part that I identified with, certainly. And then in the South, especially the Southeast, was Appalachia, Greater
Yeah.
Appalachia. And it's where my mother's folks come from.
Mm.
That tension between those three, which plays out in classism and Ohio's very conflicted race relations.
Yep,
We're in the North, but
but not.
so that it's the tension, and Derrida would call it the différance, the tension between different meanings that allow wiggle room in between them. I think that I felt that from very early on. My mother was bringing me up more or less German Lutheran, and my dad was, although he didn't realize it fully, was a spiritualist.
Hmm.
He belonged to a group where a guy was laying on the floor channeling spirits and interpreting the Bible and lost continents and reincarnation and all this stuff. And Dad's
Hmm.
coming home telling us, I can remember his legal pads full of his notes from these deep trances. And these two don't match. German Lutheran Greek theology and New Age spiritualism don't play well
Mm-mm,
together.
yeah. How do you put those together? Yeah.
And so there's that. There's the, spending one day a month on an Amish farm for a good stretch of growing up and seeing this very different way of being. Dear, amazing people. And it's the tensions, the contrasts that make it so I never quite could fit into any one category. When
And
I
really,
was
do you think that's like why you would explore so many different spiritual traditions to see if they're getting at what are they getting at? What are they trying to do?
absolutely. Um, for for sure. Journeying through Sufism, or at least filtered versions of Rumi and Ibn al-Arabi's writings. Zen Buddhism was a current from very early on. A librarian at my junior high pulled me aside and said, "You really need to read this." And it was the Tao of Pooh. Um, and
What a good librarian.
oh, we owe our lives to librarians.
Yes.
Um, and Judaism ended up being a fascinating current for me. My dad grew up in a fairly Jewish neighborhood.
Hmm.
And at that time, Canton had a strong Jewish population and
Yeah.
multiple,
Back growing up, Canton did, Cleveland did. Yeah,
yep,
quite significant.
exactly so. And that was a background current that then years later I followed up on, and it was actually reading Mordecai Kaplan's writings, which are kind of the foundation of Reconstructionist Judaism.
Oh.
Reconstructionism comes out of conservative Judaism, but has really influenced many parts of Judaism, Reformed, Reconstructionist, and some parts of Orthodoxy. But it's the
Hmm.
idea that we need to take tradition and the biblical interpretation and laws seriously, but how do we make them matter today with that
Hmm.
same resonance and not act as though things are true that aren't? His statement, the past has a vote, but not a veto. And this led me, all of those things playing around together, I see this common thread of how we live richly and deeply.
Hmm.
How do we welcome in something larger than my constructions, my conceptions, my little boxes into which I put things.
Mm. Do you think do you think it does the job it's supposed to? Does it work?
Religion?
Yeah.
Or so I'm an Episcopalian at this point in my
Me
life.
too. I think that's where we all end up.
Isn't it though? Isn't it though? Um, right. And the congregation I belong to, the parish is right on the edge of high church. We're not the highest of high church. We'll use incense twice or three times a year.
Real
Um,
fancy time.
right. And but it's a deeply liturgical.
Yes.
Um, and so we are orthopraxic. We have orthopraxy. We have the book of common prayer that we all go by, but we're definitely heterodox. We have
Mm,
a wide range of beliefs because the framework enables us to do the work of figuring out how does this matter to me now.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's
that's
fascinating. It's fascinating that to find a space where you can um, that the liturgical container, right? It's really what it is. And you can put whatever questions you have at that moment in your life and your life cycle into that container. And I remember my kids, we would joke, they were raised Episcopal and be like, oh, you don't have to believe in Jesus. It doesn't really matter if you're going here at Episcopal Church. It's just, are you questioning and trying to not be a jerk?
and I and that's of course then also my heartburn that the average Episcopalian is reading the New Yorker more than they're reading the Bible.
Yeah,
Um,
it's true.
wh- which on one level, bless our hearts, right? I want us to wrestle with the absurdity of, and I mean this in the mystical sense of this idea of Jesus. Um, Trying to make logical sense of the Trinity, trying to make logical sense of Jesus being God,
Mm,
um, and being crucified. That creates a tension that you'll hear the expression, the madness of the cross.
mm,
Um, that this is a moment of abjection. This is a moment that cannot be contained. I love that. And I'm terrified by that. And, the Easter Vigil is top two religious experiences for me. I kid that this is where we're at our most Episcopagan, right? We're outside, we light a fire, we come into the dark church and we repeat things in the darkness and we cycle through them. We tell the story of how our people came to be where we are, and we're holding our candles, our little candles, to try
mm,
to stave off the darkness. And then suddenly there is light, and we get to say a word, hallelujah, that we haven't said for, all of Lent. And I love great ritual, and I love that it doesn't all try to make full sense, but tells us don't just accept it, wrestle with it, fight with it.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
be confused by it, be uncomfortable by it, and that's okay. To be like, what am I doing? And that's
And
okay.
and not only okay, but that's really the only game in town. We're all doing that. Are we claiming that wrestling? Are
Yeah,
we digging in to the mud?
yeah. No, you lead guided meditations every Tuesday at Northeastern, which is amazing. Now, for someone who has never meditated, what would you say that meditation's actually doing for
Mm,
us? Why,
mhm.
what's it actually doing?
Yeah. So you got three ideas that are on a Venn diagram, if we can here. We've got relaxation, we've got mindfulness, and we've got meditation. And there
Hmm.
are definitely versions of each that have nothing to do with the other, and there are crossovers between them. Um, I think we undervalue relaxation because we think we know how to do it. Um, Scrolling on our phones is not relaxing.
Yeah.
We know this actually. We're finally it's now more or less common knowledge that that's just an addictive anxiety. Yeah, anxiety provoking, although not peak anxiety. It's meant to leave us disquieted. We don't actually know how to relax. We don't let ourselves relax. And
Hmm.
so, under relaxation, you get things like diaphragmatic breathing. And so, when I lead on Tuesdays, um, by the by, over the summer, we'll have Tuesday meditation. And then back in the fall, we'll be back to 5 days a week. Professor Dudley, who runs our mindfulness minor here, leads Wednesdays. I lead Tuesdays. We have a couple students leading that we've trained up to be meditation leaders. But anyway, when
Wonderful.
I lead, we focus in on belly breathing. Oh, geez, my camera's going nuts here.
It said
Um,
focus and it did right like at you. There you go. Now it's like, okay, you didn't mean it. All right.
time for my close-up. Um, I focus in on belly breathing and then tracking the breath. So rather than just sit with the breath and follow it, I start by, look, we need to bring ourselves down. And so a couple, two or three really deep belly breaths that then expand into the entirety of the torso. Um, so relaxation, we know some things about that.
Hmm.
Mindfulness, that kind of present moment awareness of what am I actually doing right now? And it's a journey, and there we have to be careful not to put too many value statements on it. There are a lot of things that we should do mindlessly,
Hmm.
things that we should do on autopilot, driving a stick shift. You can't think through, all right, now do I press the
Yeah,
clutch?
even driving in Boston, you can't think you no, don't want to think too
Competitive
much. Do
sport.
it. Do it.
Exactly. So, but as one becomes more familiar with mindfulness, then one is more actively choosing what one, well, chooses. You're able to make deliberate choices. So mindfulness, and there's not complete scholarly agreement on it. Mindfulness researchers will make a definition that fits their work best.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and then
certainly we know it's good. We just can't codify it quite.
right, right,
Yeah.
right, right, right. Then we get to the third one, meditation, and this is tricky. Um, there are a lot of different meditative traditions.
Hmm.
Um, and even within, say, Tibetan Buddhism, there are a lot of different meditations. Within India, every possible meaning, and often folks saying this is meditation and that is not. Um,
Yes. That's pranayama. This is meditation. This is, yeah.
yep. Um, in America, broadly, we have kind of a soft Buddhist meditative tradition, leaning somewhat Zen, although definitely not the whole sheet Zen approach. But there's real strong research now coming partly out of Harvard and other places that for people who continue on with meditation and who are doing the ongoing discipline of it, which is really the only way to have any of the transformation or maybe benefits of it.
No, we do it once. We're done.
Mhm. Somewheres between 1 out of 8 and 1 out of 4 people will begin to have unusual phenomena,
Mm.
odd experiences. And the point is that they ought to be working with a group and ideally with a meditative leader. Um,
Keep going. You can't live. What do you mean by odd experiences?
Depersonalization
Ah.
up to the point of hallucinations,
Hmm.
possibly a little bit of delusional material, all of which the traditions within their literature talk about what to do about.
Hmm.
In the great Zen literature, for that matter, within Christian contemplative traditions, lots of stuff about so and so starting to see visions of the cross. Time for them to work in the garden, or the kitchen.
Too far. Back up. Turn right.
Right, exactly. Get grounded.
Hmm.
This is where you'll run into these. We read these stories about the saints, like so and so had visions, but their mother superior told them this was vanity. Um, yeah, actually,
Yeah.
probably so. What are you going to do with that? You know,
Yeah.
if you're healing sick babies, okay, great.
Yeah, do it. Good. Yeah. But
But if it's
otherwise
just
you're kind of off a little bit and you need to get back
get
in
back down to
with
earth.
us.
Right. So the meditative traditions, we have long literature saying, look, weird stuff can happen, and there's a way to channel it. There's a way to focus it. But so often what we're doing is we're doing it all on our own. Meditation is supposed to be communal, at least mm, a portion of your meditative practice ought to be communal.
Mm.
What we focus in on the vast majority of our meditations over in the CSDS are guided, fairly grounded. Um, I do 3 minutes of silence that we work our way towards near the end of the meditation. Um, I borrow wantonly and probably a little appropriatively from Qigong. So we rub our ears to activate the vagus nerve. We
I, I I do the same thing. I love stealing from them, and I should do a better job. But it's so wonderful. Qigong's so
yeah.
nice.
Oh, absolutely. Um, but even within the Qigong tradition, they'll talk about something like a Qi psychosis that you've not
Mm.
been practicing as you get into more advanced Qigong and different types of breathing and energy work. You need to have somebody working on you. I did a Qigong class where we alternated between breath work in a circle. He'd pull one of us out and then be doing a Tui Na massage on our backs to
Ooh,
get our Qi going better. Yeah, cool
that's
stuff.
nice.
We don't do
Yeah.
massage over at the CSD.
I was gonna say no. I didn't think you did. Yeah.
No, but we're guided and containing,
Mm.
um, so that we have people who meditate with us very frequently. But the style of meditation we do is pretty grounded, um, and it's once a day, as
Mm.
opposed to these folks who will be meditating 3, 4, 5 times a day, 2 hour stretches, etc.
Woo!
Yeah. So there is mindfulness meditation that has relaxation elements in it, but that's quite a sweet spot. And in many cases, everyone could be in the same room, but not actually able to do all three parts of that.
100%. It can be very difficult, I find, for people who haven't done um any sort of breath work or any meditation practice. Just be like, now let's be quiet. It really can be very stressful at first.
Yeah.
It's just not accessible for everyone. It's nice, but you can't go into a room and say, okay, now do this and just expect people to be able to.
Yep. So we're mindful of that. Professor Dudley and I really love mentoring future Mellows Mindfulness Fellows.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
yeah, that's all Sagar Rajpal. He loves neologisms and alliteration. We'll have Tranquil Tuesdays in the summer.
Oh,
Um, but we're also very mindful that the person who is sitting in the room with us, this may be the first time they've ever sat down on a cushion to meditate.
mm.
And so we want to make it valuable for people who are long-term meditators and accessible and of value to somebody who's doing it for the first time. And that's
There's
that's an interesting needle to thread. But
It is. It
yeah.
is. And also it's a sweet spot because it is geared towards a community of students and learners as well as anybody else, staff, faculty. But there's this trend in businesses to, say, hey, let's lead some meditation for you
Mm,
that doesn't land well because it feels like a replacement for an actual, workable environment. Do you have thoughts? Is there some way that, because of course meditation is something we should be doing, but how do we encourage it without it being that sort of
mm.
replacement for better workplace?
Oh boy. Hmm. Yeah, corporate culture. There's something creepy there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we think about supposedly the good old days of Google when don't be evil actually was the motto. Um, and they were attempting to address Maslow's entire hierarchy of needs. You ate there at Google headquarters on their campus. I suspect many folks slept there. Your community was the people around you. And they were all exceptional people. Everyone's exceptional. You felt safe because they had security and everyone had their badges that allowed them to be in. You could have initiative of your own projects. They'd say, all right, try it out. We'll give you a room and a crew to work with. And then, if I'm remembering right, they actually had you could do volunteer activities and be paid for it through the right. So they were everything was the Google community. Um, for whatever reason, that's not what they're doing anymore.
Didn't
Um,
work.
huh. The
Huh.
venture capitalists eventually came in and said, "What are you doing with our hundreds of millions of dollars?
The
We have
people, I don't think they
really
were
happy."
very happy.
Yeah, exactly. We're producing um, several hundred very happy, actualized people, and a web browser that's pretty good. Um,
Pretty good, worked all right, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we talk about and prepare for PG-13 content. We talk about the enshittification of Google as a browser now. It's funny we don't talk about that in terms of corporate culture.
Mm.
Um, what it means in terms of the browser is that it's delaying gratification, right?
Hmm.
You get bad results so that you have to keep looking for more results and you have to click around more. That's not a bug, that's a feature. Um, what does it mean in a corporate culture where we realize that happy employees don't give us what we need? We can't afford to have happy employees. We need perpetually dissatisfied, anxious. You know,
Hmm.
one of the things that I love about teaching here at Northeastern is we have still a culture of students that support each other.
Yeah. Hmm.
And that these are
100%.
students that don't think that the only way for me to get ahead is to push somebody down, that we can support, study, edit, give suggestions. There are finding a lab placement here is practically a rite of passage. And you're not going to do it if you don't network to your fellow students. How'd you
Hmm.
get this? How did you get there? And you can work your way into these opportunities. I love that about us. Naming no names, there are other nearby institutions that are quite the opposite. I take great pride in us being an excellent institution that actually has that we take care of each other ethos. That is an ethos that is a culture that has to be on cultivated on an ongoing basis. Um,
Yes.
I think and this is a long way around your question about meditation in the workplace. If you have a culture of meditation, but it's a shark tank, then it's worse than if you never had meditation.
Hmm.
You're actually making people acutely aware of what's so terribly wrong. Our Zen Buddhist, our Buddhist family members, siblings, note that as one meditates, what does bubble up is compassion, is loving kindness.
Yes.
That's not a you should cultivate it in your meditation. This is what happens when you meditate. You actually can no longer look at the person across from you and see a thing. You
Hmm.
have this encounter, this inexplicable moment. There's the wordless sutra. Zen Buddhism traces its origins back to one moment with the Buddha. The Buddha is trying to, Siddhartha Buddha, Gautama Buddha, is trying to convey the Dharma, and the disciples aren't getting it. And so he sighs and he holds up a flower. He picks a flower and holds it up, and one person smiles, and that's the origin of the Zen tradition. Um, that effulgence, evanescence, that sublimity of the moment of that's what meditation can afford us. That's what that presence of mindfulness can afford us. to yank us out of the everydayness, which is not everydayness at all. It's actually the wool we've pulled over our own eyes.
Well, what's interesting, and you talk about that, is that's you described one of the reasons that I love Northeastern and came here all the way from Arkansas in a way that I wouldn't have thought about it. And that's because what I see is that we are working towards solutions,
Hmm.
um, solutions to all the things that are difficult in our world and to make our place a better place. And if we have competitors, we're not going to do that. We can't do it in competition because making these solutions involves more than just our individual brain power. And so something like meditation helps us get to those solutions to understand them. So do things like the worker space and all these stuff where we're getting together towards it. And it really, that act of creativity um, together is what's going to give us the meaningful life, those solutions towards the end. And so we won't get there with the competition. We just get more misery and we won't have a meaningful life. Um, so that's what I see. And I was like, oh, you put those things together for me, that creativity being key. And that creativity has to come with working together towards solutions. So I want to hear a little bit about your forthcoming book, Spiritual Direction and the Other,
Yeah.
coming out soon. Will you
Peter
talk a little bit
Capret,
about
yeah.
that?
Peter Capretto, a wonderful colleague who's down at Phillips Seminary in Tulsa. Um, and I've gotten to know through the psychology and the other conferences at Boston College, and a graduate of Northeastern who worked with my psychological humanities at Northeastern FANU group,
Mhm.
Gracie Vogel. We are editors of this volume. We wrote a chapter together, and Peter and I each have a chapter on our own. It came out of a spiritual direction salon, the idea of let's bring together people into conversation about what do we mean by spiritual direction. Um, and so we have a, a nice array of voices coming out of Buddhism, out of Christianity,
Mhm.
out of a more evangelical Christianity, Episcopalian Christianity, out of Caribbean post-colonial scholarship, queer scholarship, and a nice range of voices that kind of bump up against each other. It starts with an essay that questions, when you talk about spiritual direction, certainly within the European Christian tradition, they talk about the Desert Fathers and Mothers.
Mhm.
Early within the first couple hundred years of the Common Era, monks, ascetics, and nuns out in the desert in little cells, contemplating. And folks would come out to them to figure life out, figure their well-being of their souls out. And the Jonathan Zecker, an Australian scholar, questions that and says, well, if you actually dig into that, you realize there's quite a bit of Greek medical thought
Mhm.
informing the writings about the Desert Fathers and Mothers. And so we have to understand this pre-Christian um, Greek medical context about humors and emotions and affects and what they mean and what then the metaphors the Desert Fathers and Mothers were applying. And so we stretch the provenance of spiritual direction as our first kind of placeholder there. One of the things that drew me to Dante was that Dante is happening just before modernity.
Mhm.
Historians are starting to throw this term away, but whatever happened with the Renaissance and the Enlightenment changes Europe. It's also, of course, the colonial era, the beginning of the colonial era. And Dante is hitting just before that in 1300. And so when we look at someone like Dante, we can imagine, or it challenges us to see with different eyes and not the assumptions about individuality, about we have this idea of the see-through glowy soul, right?
Mhm.
And that really, in many ways, comes out of spiritualism, which is 1840 and forward. And so
Hmm.
in my response to Jonathan Zecker, I try to contextualize this and ask how much more radically might we revision what we mean by soul, about spirit, if we can challenge the baggage we've inherited over the last 500 years.
Hmm.
In particular, I draw on then the portion of Jungian scholarship that I'm involved in comes out of the work of James Hillman and archetypal or imaginal psychology. And Jim's root metaphor is soul. And by soul, he means soulfulness. He's taking the word psyche, which we too often in psychology think means mind, but it easily means soul.
Hmm.
And thus, words like psychopathology are the language of soul suffering. It's that
Hmm.
poetic and that sense of, to get back to the first point, that deep meaningfulness. Hillman
Hmm.
is about deepening, about depth. And soulfulness is not that happiness, it's that depth of feeling. Um, and so in this volume, we're playing around with really challenging a lot of the root assumptions that go into spiritual direction, and trying to say this may be something that we've been looking for. Our hunger for connection, our hunger to have these conversations, our hunger to take seriously but not literally our faith lives. This
Hmm.
could be a big portion of what spiritual direction could offer us. For me, receiving spiritual direction up at Bethany House of Prayer um, has been hugely transformative. It was the right time in my life to encounter it, but I'd been through two courses of analysis and a course of therapy, and I was on a good day neurotic. But spiritual direction really, for me, cracked me open in a way that I so desperately needed. And so this volume is an effort to try to bring literature that's not in lockstep. It's not just out of one tradition, so that we can
Hmm.
open up and deepen, not loosen up, but deepen our sense of what it could be.
I love that. So add layers of richness and depth and possibility, right?
Exactly.
Right? There it doesn't have to be one solution. We can have multiple ones.
Let us
So
hope.
yes, I only have two more questions for you. One is, if someone listening right now is feeling stuck, what's one thing that you feel they can do today to help themselves?
Mm. Well, one, get outside, put down the phone, um, talk to someone.
Mm.
I mean, it all stuff that's right here. We are hungry for contact. I mean, I grew up in an area when Leo Biscaglia was a very prominent speaker. He was the hug guy, right? Now, today, obviously, there's all kinds of issues. And so we always ask permission before we hug people. But I mean, when I see people hugging their friends, I have hope for humanity, right? Um, in addition to all the oxytocin and all the other stuff my neuro colleagues say, the hug is this, you and I are sharing this space in a way that is remarkable. Um, that's what we need, and not as a um, one and done, but as just an ongoing commitment. But today, yes, get outside, put down your
Get
phone,
us
talk to somebody, and if there are people that you love, ask them if you can hug them.
there. Yeah.
We need those hugs. I would also add in golden retrievers, very important. Cooper and Ryder, the
Yeah.
dogs, so important. Sarge is awesome. Labradors are lovely, and you've got an adorable
I've got a
poodle.
Westie portable.
Westie.
Mhm.
Again,
Portable. She's portable.
oh,
My
so
Westie. Yes.
portable. Very portable. Yes, yes, yes. I was raised by a golden retriever though, so yeah,
They're wonderful.
we need that so much.
Yeah.
When we get I'll talk to folks who are, wrestling with really sophisticated spiritual ideas, and that is awesome, and never ever want to discourage that. But I'm also curious, are you sitting down with people you care about? Are you sharing a meal? Are you looking folks in the eyes? Um,
And what I find is people are generally nicer than we imagine.
mm. If we could actually get to people,
If we
yeah,
can get to them,
absolutely.
they're generally nicer than we imagine. Generally goes really well. It honestly does. Human beings are pretty much the same. We want the same things overall, you know?
And when we let down all the not so human things about us, it is remarkable in our wonderful brokenness and vulnerability, what we can be with each other. Yeah.
That's right. All right, the last question. You get a song for the Happy West playlist. Any song you want. You get to add it
Ooh.
to it. Yes, any song you want to add to this playlist.
I'll just go with my instinct. Golden Slumbers, uh,
Perfect.
off of
It'll be on there.
off of Abbey Road.
Yes.
Yeah,
Can't go wrong.
and I mean the whole that'll lead you to want to do the whole Sun King suite on the B side of it. Do we even have B sides anymore? Anyway, yeah,
Oh, no, records are back. They're
yeah.
back.
Oh,
People are
good.
buying vinyl again like mad.
So yeah, the but if one song, Golden Slumbers.
You got it. Well, Dr. Daniels, this has been so wonderful. Such a perfect way to spend my Thursday morning. I appreciate you being here talking with us, and it's just been an honor. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, this was lovely. I'm so glad you're doing this, and best of luck on the continued conversations.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.